Thanks very much, Catherine. Yeah, thank you. It's a unique experience, if you excuse the pun, to be doing this for the first time. I thought it was a great way to lead off with Gavin there. Thanks for the introduction regarding me. But what I've got is, and I'll just share my screen here, is a presentation where, and I feel a little bit like Hudson and Hall here, because rather than me introduce, here's one I prepared earlier is the way that I'm going to approach this. So hopefully you're now seeing a lovely vista of New Zealand shot from a bit of drone footage. I believe this is NZTE B-roll, so we have been utilising the resources of the sponsors, so thank you very much to them. Catherine, you're the only person I can see on the screen, so can you just confirm that you can see that rolling through? Just put your thumb up. That's great. Excellent. So the Natural Pet Food Group is the holding company of what's commonly called Canine Natural, and Canine Natural was where we started, but we have been moving through a process of developing a portfolio of brands. So rather than being the branded house of Canine Natural Limited, we're now using the Natural Pet Food Group a lot more and positioning ourselves as a house of brands. So in terms of a bit of an intro, I'll flick on to a presentation which hopefully you'll be able to hear because I clicked that button. Our business started in a shed here in Christchurch with the crazy idea that the carnivores in our household would actually be a lot healthier if we fed them meat rather than high carbohydrate kibbles. So here we are 13 years later, exporting over 90% of our product to over a dozen countries and espousing the benefits of New Zealand grass-fed meat to the global household pet population. All of this from our humble Addington HQ, where 35 passionate cantabs are doing their best to turn the global pet food business on its head. We really are the hair on the end of the tail, successfully wagging the dog. So that was Kevin, the office dog, and if there is one person who's really suffering from lockdown, it's Kev. He loves his trip into the office to see all his human friends and also his four-legged friends. And in terms of an office environment, it is a fantastic environment where we do have on any given day up to a dozen dogs running around. So it's a great way of leveling everybody out after any of the stresses that can happen with export markets. Just a bit about our market. So, we operate in 12 different countries, and we regard ourselves as being a bit of a four-legged stool. So we're roughly evenly spread between North America, China, the rest of Asia, including Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong, and then Australia, New Zealand. And they're all relatively evenly sort of 25% buckets, which gives us a little bit of geographic spread, which is certainly helpful in situations like a COVID-19 outbreak. And in terms of marketing to those markets, what we're trying to do is apply a relatively consistent global brand proposition, but then try and execute locally. And so one of the tools that we have developed is building on the NZ story work and the B-rolls from the NZ story is we've developed our own brand video. And I know that that's a question that a lot of people get asked, particularly from NZTE, saying, are you using the NZ story piece? So I thought it might be useful to just show you how we've used it, but also give you a bit more background on our brand and our proposition. So I'll just roll through this video as well.
At Canine Natural and Feline Natural, we understand that every member of your family deserves the best natural nutrition to enjoy a happy, healthy life. We care because that's how we feel about our loved ones too. We're committed to providing the most nutritious meals for your pets made with the highest quality of natural ingredients ethically sourced in New Zealand. Our pristine island country is naturally protected, providing the healthiest environment for our food to grow. Our land and ocean waters give us plenty of the very best. So we give you nature's best too. Grass-fed and free-range, all our whole food ingredients are sustainably farmed and human-grade. We blend nature with the power of science to deliver a diet that your pets are instinctively drawn to. World-class research by our in-house nutritional team underpins our high-meat, grain-free diets, complete and balanced for all life stages. delivering your pet the natural energy to truly thrive and enjoy every moment of every day. Our food is produced in small batches in the safe and clean environment of our New Zealand government-approved high-end production facilities. It is thoroughly tested so your pet gets the safest, tastiest and healthiest food. Smart technology and innovation allow us to consistently meet the highest standards in nutrition and quality control. So from farm gate to your pet's plate, we are proud to deliver the best blend of science and nature. And that's very important for us, because we know your loved ones deserve the very best. Canine Natural, Feline Natural. Inspired by nature, guided by science.
Sorry, you can't avoid interruptions when you've got a house full of kids, can you? So I've just got one wandering in, coming to see what I'm doing. So yeah, so that's pretty much where I'm going to go off script. So prior to the events of the last couple of weeks, I had intended to sort of continue on that theme and share with you guys how we had been approaching our market development, our brand development, channel strategies and portfolio strategies as we'd rolled through our export markets. And in some of these markets, we've been operating for over 10 years. And so we've seen sort of natural progression into those markets. But I suppose at the beginning of this week, in sort of consultation with Kathy, I came to the conclusion that none of it actually feels particularly relevant right now. So thinking about what does the global events of the last few weeks actually mean for us, and that's where most of our focus is now. And we're at a point in time where we're a few days into our new financial year, and already we're ripping up our strategy document for the year and saying, actually, what does this look like? So I thought that was probably a better way to use the 15 minutes that I've got left. So what I thought I'd do is just talk you through the approaches that we've been taking towards firstly dealing with COVID-19, and then some of the questions we've got, or some of the opportunities we're seeing in markets that over time might evolve. But I think for all of us, we're probably sitting there thinking, what does export look like post COVID-19, or in this COVID-19 era? And certainly I'd be happy to facilitate, or at least throw a few ideas out there, because like everybody else in the room, I'm keen to draw on everybody else's experience as well. So what I thought I'd do is sort of start with first things first, and that's around keeping our people safe, and we've sort of looked at that as obviously our first and most important piece. And so for our business, we've got teams in the US, teams in Japan, we've got employee in China. So we've had a lot of visibility around what's been going on in the rest of the world, but obviously we've also got some real concerns about making sure that they are all safe. Most of our business is based here in New Zealand, and our office in Christchurch, where we've got about 30 employees. And I think our exposure to China early on gave us a real sense of the realities of the situation. And as a result, back at the beginning of March, we put in place a number of simple things which now seem really important around social distancing and hand hygiene and deep cleans and the like. And the reason and also anyone that was coming back from overseas was having a short stand down as well. And the reason I say it was important is that this time last week, we had confirmation of one of the people in our office testing positive to COVID-19. So we'd got caught up in the cluster that was the World Hereford Convention in Queenstown. One of our employees had a house guest staying after that and had contracted COVID-19 and was still at work. So we've gone through the process of then going through close contact tracing. We had set up a register so we knew where everyone was, who was in the office on what days. So that made it much quicker to do that. Subsequently, 4 people were identified as close contacts and subsequently symptomatic and subsequently tested. But I'm really pleased to say that all 4 have come back negative. So in terms of doing our little bit to end a chain of transmission, we're feeling really good about some of those things that we did. So we're very pleased that we did step in early on a number of those things, and it has paid dividends, because the alternative consequences, don't be thinking about if that had got right through our whole office and then through into our families. So we've had a really close scare. So if anybody out there, and I'm sure no one is feeling complacent about it, hopefully that's a little reality check for you. And then the other piece is around just, and Gavin touched on this, about culture, and plans and strategies won't get you nearly as far as a great team culture in a crisis environment like this. And so making sure you preserve what you've got, or build on what you've got, is crucial. So we've been over communicating, and trying to be really calm, really clear in our communication. We've been personally, I've been dialing into most of the team meetings just to get a sense of what's going on, but also just to give that level of confidence around what we're doing around business continuity to keep moving. Like Gavin, I love some of those ideas that the team come up with around connection. A number of those we've got similar, but one of the unique things that we've adopted is twice weekly lunchtime yoga, virtual yoga, which is hilarious. And we've got our US team. We haven't yet got the Japanese involved. I think there might be some cultural issues there, but we've got Australia, New Zealand, and the US all dialing in for a couple of yoga sessions a week. And so one of our head of global sales, his wife's a yoga instructor, and they're sitting at home. So she was quite happy to facilitate that. Like most of us, 4 o'clock this afternoon, there'll be some a happy hour amongst the group as well. So making sure that we keep connected when we're not spending time physically together has been really important. And then I suppose the second phase, once you've sort of ensured that you've got your people safe, is then keeping your business going. And so the pet industry across the world is deemed essential. So it's the same in New Zealand, Australia, the US. So that's great for us. First step, of course, is then to understand what that means, understand your registrations. Those of you that are in essential business would have gone through this process last week. It's amazing what we've done in a week. None of us knew what that meant, but registering our essential workers. Our factories have had MPI visits to ensure that the new processes are all in place, and we're pleased to say we're at about 80% of what we would want as our capacity today. So it's taken a bit of time to build up to that, but we have got to that level. The other thing that's been really useful for us, and I suppose again we got the insight into China in terms of what was happening and what was likely to happen, but we carry inventory, so again that's a real advantage for export businesses around the world right now. I think is that most of us carry inventory rather than our in-market competitors who have these super fast, efficient supply chains that are just in time, who they need one little hiccup and they go out of stock. So we recognize this, but we also went to allocation very early. So a month ago we started allocating key SKUs into the US and Australia. So that we've been able to maintain supply of our key SKUs. We've flipped our production schedules around so that we're focusing on our key SKUs at the risk of some of our minor SKUs going out of stock. And then also trying to get really close to some of the really unusual market dynamics that are happening. So, the US is a good example where a lot of our competitors sell frozen product, and so the Americans with their big deep freezers will fill it up with frozen dog food. As they prepared to go into quarantine, they started looking at that freezer space for human food. And so what used to get filled up with dog food was, they were now saying we need to empty the dog food out, and so they look for alternatives. And we do a freeze-dried product, which is able to be stored ambient. And so we've seen a big swing across into our large bags of freeze-dried products. So getting early views on those things has then helped us in terms of what are we putting in the next container that ships through to the US. So really trying to stay very, very close to what is a very dynamic and fluid and changing market. And there's a lot of different nuances that are coming out of consumer behavior now that create either issues for you, or potentially they can create some opportunities. So that's been our next challenge, is around keeping the business going, and then looking further as I talk about these opportunities onto how do you keep your business growing. And I think particularly for the primary sector, thinking about the impacts on the New Zealand economy of this, and the fact that it's highly unlikely we're going to have any international tourism for a long time, I feel. So in terms of getting New Zealand back on its feet, there is a big part of that that's going to have to be carried by the primary sector and food exporters. And so we really do have this opportunity, but also this obligation to be finding ways to grow our business and grow New Zealand's export income through this. So being really close to these opportunities that present themselves, and I've talked a lot around the team over the last month around how do we identify the unforeseen bottlenecks, and there's been some good examples of those. So containers into New Zealand, it's been hard to get containers back. The North Asian shipping routes had a 3-week hole in it, so we haven't been able to ship into that North Asian market of sort of Japan, Korea, and then through to China. So there's those sorts of bottlenecks, but at the same time, on the other side of that, you end up with oversupply. And a simple example in our household is my wife coming home a week or so ago with 4 beautiful legs of export quality lamb that she got dirt cheap. And so they're the sorts of opportunities you're sort of looking around and going, well, I wonder what else has been disrupted, and is there an opportunity for us to take advantage of some of those things? And so they're the bits that we're now starting to look at. We're fortunate in terms of the way our markets have turned back on, that the China and rest of Asia markets are now back to quite close to normal, and that's 50% of our business. So while we're very concerned about what might happen in North America and Australia, we do have some certainty around, or some confidence around, the performance of those Asian markets and our ability to continue to generate good numbers out of those places. And that'll help us then to absorb the volatility that we think still to come from the US and Australia. It also means that we can focus much more on the US and Australia in terms of understanding where the risks are, but also understanding the opportunities, because we've gone through that process in China. So I think it's really important that we have that mindset. So when you get thrown into a crisis, and I'm sure you're all doing it, but you firstly think about your own safety and the safety of your team, and then okay, so how do we sustain our business? How do we make sure we have a business? But at the same time, then being able to lift our horizons up and just say, and now how do I get this business growing? Because the runway out of lockdown is going to be much harder than going into it. And it's really important that export businesses who have the opportunities take them, because, there's a bunch of New Zealand businesses that aren't in the position that they're able to do it. So I think that's a challenge to all of us that do have businesses that are continuing to operate and do have these opportunities, that we absolutely make the most of them. And so then talking about, some of the challenges, and I think, the thing for us is that, most of our strategy is out the window. We relied a lot on some really cool experiential activities to grow trial and awareness around markets. And we do these things like called Bon Appetit, where basically you take your dog along and your dog gets fed and you get fed the same ingredients but made human style. So you imagine what that's like. Grass-fed New Zealand lamb and green lip mussels and all that stuff that we put into our dog food, that then you have a chef do for the pet parent as well. We've just signed up to do the outdoor cinema rounds through Australia and New Zealand with our Meat Mates brand. Now, whether that's even going to happen or not is moot. I can't see it happening. So we've had all these strategies that have been around creating unique and amazing experiences for people with their pets. We have to rethink that completely, and so that's the process that we're now sort of engaging in. And I just thought I'd sort of throw out a few thought starters in terms of things that are different and what they might mean for us. So, we've told our story through shoe leather, and it's a real Kiwi way of doing it. We get out into the markets, and a little bit of accent helps. We have some great pictures of what New Zealand looks like. We're not going to be able to do that in the short term, so we really have to think about how we sell our story virtually. So, the NZ story video that we've got there. And a number of other assets are going to become increasingly important in terms of how we will do this. This is a picture of Dr. Josie Gallen. Josie's Sydney-based. She's a vet and ambassador We were about to launch some experiences with her where you go out on a boat on the Sydney Harbour with key customers, and she'll spend an hour talking to them about pet nutrition. Now, we can't do that. We've flipped that immediately into her doing Facebook Live sessions and blogs. Same thing in China with our key influencers and key opinion leaders in China. We're having to flip that from doing a Bon Appetit in Shanghai to actually how do we use WeChat and our KOLs much more effectively this year. But that's one of the challenges that we will face, which is a very different strategy from where we were intending to be. We've also had to do a bit of a stock take on our in-market assets, and I think you have to think quite laterally about this as well. And so this is where NZTE, to think of the offices there, and I would imagine that there'll be some discussions around actually creating much bigger presences in markets. They already have a reasonably big presence, but I could see it becoming increasingly important that we have more and more people who are working on our behalf up there, because I can't see us being able to jump on planes and go and do this stuff for some period of time. But also thinking about how you use your teams, how you get more out of your teams. In our case, I'm just looking at our travel budget, and we've got a massive amount of saving there that can be redeployed into leveraging these in-market assets better. But thinking through who are your agencies, who are the people you trust up there, how do you better use your distributors? What are your networks? The PCNZ model into Shanghai. I think this is it's a great opportunity for them to expand and offer more services if travel into China continues to be very difficult. The idea of going on a business trip and having to spend 14 days in quarantine before you can do a meeting is not going to be that appealing to anybody for a long period of time. So I think we have to live with this new virtual reality that everything's going to have to be done at arm's length. So I think collaboration's another idea that we really have to work on. So again, this is a New Zealand Inc. problem. We have to work on this together. So thinking about who do you know in New Zealand who has assets in markets around the world that you want to participate in, and could you have a conversation with them about them helping you do it? Likewise, we're thinking about where we have teams and a bunch of other people inside small businesses inside the pet space, not necessarily competitors of ours that we know well because we go to all the same trade shows, and they won't be able to get on a plane either, and they'll really do it tough in terms of hand selling because they're at a much smaller level and they don't have teams. Can we help them? Can we say, hey, look, let's distribute some of your products and we'll get our team educated on it and help them sell? So I think there's a bunch of collaboration ideas that we're going to have to start to do. And the days of New Zealand companies going around the world competing with each other, I mean, they've been dying out anyway, but I think this has to be the death knell. We all have to think about how we can maximize what we can do for New Zealand in the export markets, rather than just be worried about what we do for ourselves at the expense of those people who we've deemed to be competitors back here. Again, I think this one's another movement that has to accelerate, particularly in the primary sector. The primary sector basically believes that we've got a farm for 40 million people here, and we can feed 40 million people, and that's 8 times as many that live here. So we do have a really unique opportunity because the world needs food. But at the moment, in a lot of markets, we take a view that we have to be the lowest, we have to meet the lowest price, or we have to compete with other inferior products. If we're to come out of this and, again, think about the dollars that we need to pick up to cover where tourism was at, we have to be extracting as much as we possibly can from those 40 million people that we feed. And so targeting anybody in mainstream or below consumers just doesn't make any sense. And so everything we should be doing should be being about adding value and trying to do that in New Zealand so that we can cover some of the whole of these other industries that aren't able to continue to act. And then the last thing, and this is a bit of an observation for me, just around how we've struggled with scale as a business, and we've always gone, what happens to how do we get big enough that we can actually automate a lot more? And we're in 12 different markets. Every market needs something slightly different. And as a result, you never really get to great economies of scale. And I've sort of thought about that and I've flipped it on its head and said, well, actually, right now, that's being really useful for us. So us being inefficient and having to hold inventory and having to hold a high range is actually helping us against our competitors right now. And if we are going to move to a value versus volume paradigm, then actually nimble's much more important, and thinking about, what assets do we have and what will be an oversupply right now. And then, thinking about labor as an example. So we're able to switch our lines quite quickly, but we have to throw people at it. And right now you think, well, actually, there's a lot more people that potentially we could be throwing at this. So if we can continue to extract more value, we may just be able to put on a second shift and employ a few more people and do those sorts of things and worry about automation much less, and instead say, actually, how can we create artisan products for the world and really take that mindset? Obviously, we have to extract more value to be able to afford to do it, but we really don't have an alternative, because we won't ever be high enough scale to compete directly with any of these large food manufacturers around the world. So we need to turn that weakness into an opportunity, and it has actually presented itself as an opportunity for us right now, where these guys who are highly automated, they lose 4 or 5 people from their factory and they shut down for 2 weeks. So we're seeing a number of our competitors where that's happened, and we are able to fill the space on shelves. So we're getting a lift from the fact that we are less efficient. We're not, we're not doing just in time, but that model has some strengths in a situation like this. That was it. I wanted to end with a really positive note, and I think at times like this, there's a lot to be grateful for. Being here, if you're going to be locked down anywhere in the world, there's a hell of a lot of people around the world that would choose here, and also we're a very high pet-owning, pet-loving population, and so I know that apart from Kevin, who's missing getting into work every day, there are a lot of pets out there right now that are loving having their humans at home, but equally there are a lot of humans loving having their pets at home at a time like this. So there is a heap to be grateful for, but there's also a hell of a lot of heavy lifting to do over the next couple of years. So that's it. I'll close that screen down, and then happy to answer any questions.